The moderator, Joshua Rynjah, is an assistant professor teaching English literature and language. He is an avid fan of comics and graphic novels and has worked on several as a script writer and editor. He has also served as a guest lecturer and resource person on comics and graphic novels.
So I would first like to thank the organizers for this opportunity of having comic books and graphic novels as a category in the literary festival. It's sometimes forgotten, it's sometimes overlooked, but it's a very good opportunity that we this trend of giving importance to comics and graphic stories and images will continue in future literary festivals as well. So before we proceed, just a few words on the topic. We have images, words and stories, graphic novels and comics. So I would first like to start with the idea of the image, that the image is something which is very primordial. The image is something that is connected to our evolution as a human species, evolution of our civilization. So before we have the written word, before we have text and so on, we have images in the form of cave paintings. That is our first step to art and culture in civilization. Then you also have this idea where the image is not connected to any kind of structure in language. Anyone can understand an image, so that is why it is so appealing, whether with different age groups, from children to adults, or in different communities also. They can connect easily with an image because there is none of that complication that comes with symbols and structures of languages. So the image, now the second part before we proceed is this connection between the image and the word. And so here we have this connection between images and the spoken word rather than the written word. So in tribal societies, we start not with the written word, we give more importance to the spoken word. That is our oral literature. So what we have in oral literature is very similar to what you have in images. Okay, so in oral literature, we create the image through sound. So we have different stories, our folk tales, our legends and myths, and all of these create images, but they create it through sound. Whereas here, we have images with lines. So there's a kind of a natural harmonious connection between the images of lines and the images of sound. So that progresses accordingly. So with that, I would like to proceed. I'm very thankful that we have a wide variety of artists and resource persons and experts coming from overseas, from here in the Northeast, from India itself, who will be sharing their expertise, who will be sharing their journey in graphic novels and comic books. So in the beginning, I would first like to call upon Parismita Singh. She is a writer, a graphic novelist, and an educationist. Her publications include the graphic novels The Hotel at the End of the World, Mara and the Clay Cows, Grab Chronicles, and a collection of short stories, Peace Has Come. She helped conceptualize the power and theology of comics and has edited Centerpiece, New Writings and Art Form from Northeast India. She also works in education. So Ms. Parismita will be starting our session, and I request that the audience, what we will do, the format is that all the resource persons, our guests, will give their presentations. I request the audience just to note down whatever questions and queries you have, and then at the end of the session, we will have an interactive session. So I now hand over the stage to Ms. Parismita.
Just to begin, with Hotel at the End of the World, I started working on this book at a time when I did not feel like there were a lot of that I did not feel that there were too many traditions that I could draw upon. And so, the next slide, please. Yes, so for instance, this huge marker, and yes, and it's a privilege to have Amrit Chitakatha here as well, right? And so, but again, it's also interesting to note that when I began working in for this first book, I actually took a conscious position to defy some of these influences and to come up with a vocabulary that would did not depend upon the kind of books that were in the comics that were in the market and that I had read too. So yes, so at one level, beginning work was also a refusal of kinds, because I did not see a reflection of the kind of stories I wanted to tell in the kind of comics that were available to me at that point. Yes, so the other option, the other comics that were also familiar in my childhood, I'm not sure if they're even around now, were these commander comics, which also had a reference to the Northeast often, especially Imphal and Nagaland and the theater of the Second World War, but depicted the natives, which is us, in this really, they just had these like side roles. So, as a child, you feel very excited to suddenly see someone, a Naga person or an Imphal person. But they were either like the loyal, they were like very loyal to the British, or they were like the spies of the Japanese or something. But they had really small roles. But their roles were very, sometimes demeaning, but often very problematic. So when I began working on this comic, there was really a very conscious refusal of a lot of the kind of comics traditions that were around me. And I tried to come up with a vocabulary somewhat where I was looking for stories that were of people who, stories of the Second World War that circulated among the communities of the Northeast, in Northeast India, especially Imphal, Nagaland, Arunachal, all the regions that I was sort of, I don't name them because it is fiction, so I do world making in a certain way, but it was definitely inspired by other voices and other images and other worldviews of this region and of its histories. Yes, so for instance, and the inspiration was all over, especially for those of you who are going to begin working and hope to write your own comics. For instance, we still have World War II tanks just lying around our things. So a lot of these stories, then, so some of these tanks literally just moved into my story. I literally just moved them very literally into the story and sort of spun my world around them. Yes. So then again, there was also a reaching out towards other art traditions of the region, and also a sense of like how to do it respectfully and how to incorporate it into my story, and at the same time come up. So the first book was very much a struggle for a certain kind of vocabulary of images and storytelling that would reflect the world that I knew. Yes, and so to jump from that was an early, so I'm just going to dwell on three things. The other wonderful opportunity I had was in 2017 to edit a book which allowed me to, because I work across genres, it allowed me to move from the image purely as a graphic novel text, as a graphic novel form, to also move and see how I could explore it through the community of writers and poets and artists, and also at the level of form, to see what it would be like to sort of invite people to come in and open out the form in terms of text, in terms of photographs, and in terms of sketches, poetry, and but around fiction and non-fiction journalistic work, but around the theme of this region and women's work. Yeah. And then to conclude, so the other big project that I think has been very, very influential to my work, because I work in prose and I work in graphic novels, but what has been very, that made a big impression, I think, on my practice, on my own reflection of my work, was this project that I did with the graphic novel narrative form, working on a couple of visual essays, 2018-20 for Huffington Post India, which of course, as most of you know, does not exist any longer. But there were a series of essays where non-fiction essays on the political situation, on a particular political moment in Assam. So this was a huge, huge, huge change from Hotel at the End of the World, which was fiction and where I really had a lot of liberty to be able to move across styles, to move across stories, and really craft, and really sort of very steadily hone and craft a particular kind of story that I want to tell. And so with the non-fiction graphic narratives, and I feel such regret that in a country like India, we do not have an opportunity to do more work of this kind. Because then again, I should quickly say here, and I'm sure Rohan and Joshua and everyone else, Kenneth, everyone else, I'm talking about the people in this country, understand that so much of the work we produce is also contingent upon people who are willing to carry the work for us, the funds that are going to come into the work. So Joshua and I, we just had a conversation a few minutes earlier about how so much of his work is published independently, and that often produces great work and fine work. But the next step, we do need to have this, we do need a media ecosystem that supports different form of comics, especially non-fiction writing, especially non-fiction comics. So it was a great experience because I was able to, because it involved reporting from the field, sketches in the field. So the sketches are not great. They're not, I was a little bit conscious initially of not having these perfect sketches, but you have deadlines and you have to do this. You have to get the story out really quickly. But at the same time, this was a huge experience for me on how the graphic novel form can be used, and its strengths as well as its limitations, and how we work around these limitations, how we push these, and how essentially we make it our own for our own stories, and the kind of and the kind of sort of and the kind of risk that this kind of storytelling carries, the kind of ethical questions that this kind of reporting comes with it. So I'm not going to go into detail about this project. We can speak about it later. But the non-fiction comics for me was a very important was very important to my practice, because for questions of ethics, reporting, images, the power of images, as well as the ability to as well as the risk that comes from portraying stories in the images, and a whole lot of other factors like that, right? So on this note, I'm going to, I'm going to conclude on this note, so we have some time for a conversation later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Parismita. So we'll move straight on to our next. As I said earlier, I request the audience to please note down their questions, observations, which they would want to share later on at the end of the session. So to save time, we'll move on to our next expert. Our guest is Mr. Rohan Chakravarty. So Mr. Chakravarty is, as he says, notorious for rolling up into a ball like a pangolin to avoid meeting people. So he's a cartoonist, illustrator, and the creator of Green Humor, a series of cartoons, comics, and illustrations on wildlife and nature conservation. Cartoons from Green Humor appear periodically in newspaper columns, magazines, and journals. Illustrations from Green Humor have been used for several projects and campaigns on wildlife awareness and conservation. Rohan is also the author of Green Humor for a Greying Planet and Naturalist Rudy, and has won awards by UNDP, WWF International, the Royal Bank of Scotland, the Bangalore and Green Literature Festivals for his work. Mr. Rohan, please.
Thanks Joshua, and I'm really proud to be a part of such a diverse set of artists. I guess only Kenneth and I are cartoonists and comic strip artists here, so that makes us the jokers among aces. It's true, I roll up into a ball like a pangolin to avoid socializing. I'm bad at it. Fake a smile, fake a smile. All right, I won't waste much time. My idea was to discuss each of the context of the cartoons I'm going to display to you, but what I'm going to do to save time is just let them appear on screen, read them out to you, and if they spark any questions among all of you, I'll be happy to take them at the end of the presentation. So my work is called Green Humor. It's a collection of cartoons, comics, illustrations on wildlife and nature conservation, and various aspects of communication that come along with them, which I'm going to discuss with you now. So here's a cartoon about deforestation, for example. A tiger overlooking a deforested piece of forest says, "Hey, wait a second, I don't remember signing any clearance papers." Plastic pollution, both in the marine and the freshwater context. Good morning, everyone. I'm a marine biologist. I welcome you all to the Marine Environment Awareness Program. All set for your first activity. What's the activity? I'm going to shove plastic waste down your throats and you'll tell me how it feels. I'm sure all of you can identify the person on the left. I'm not going to take any names, but my dear tribal people, we have decided to turn your pristine island into a megacity like Singapore and Hong Kong. But sir, Singapore and Hong Kong do not have tribal residents. Exactly. Bycatch is an issue that I've produced a lot of work on. Bycatch is all the discarded animals that are caught and discarded as part of commercial industrialized fishing. For example, just for a plate of garlic shrimp, you get all those animals that you see on the right panel. They could include stingrays, sharks, octopuses, dolphins, turtles, etc. So what's happening here? A visibly rich man goes to a high-end restaurant to order a plate of shrimp. A fisherwoman comes and dumps all the bycatch on his plate and says, "Enjoy your meal, the bycatch is complimentary." Not all of my work is gloom and doom. Some is also to highlight lesser-known animals and lesser-known parts of ecology in a fun way. So here's a comic strip about all the things that moths can do, but I can't. Sustain an entire ecosystem. Wear gaudy clothing and look good. Wear drab clothing and look good. Pretend to be bird poop to avoid unwanted company. Something I would really want to learn to do, especially at family gatherings. Not be ashamed of teenage pictures, and actually apply mathematics to life. This moth you see, called the Luna moth, has specialized appendages to deflect the sonar of bats. So moths are able to actually apply mathematics to life. And I've grown to believe that cartoons are anthropomorphism, a tool we use so often to attribute human qualities to non-human subjects, has helped me form an instant connect between my subjects and my readers. Here's a dolphin communicating with her father in sonar, much like a baby would. And I also use humor and satire to tackle misconceptions propagated by the media about wild animals. If you compare the statistics about how many sharks are killed by humans versus the other way around, you'll find a staggering difference. And the politics of conservation is also something I discuss quite often in my work, especially when there is a collision of environmental issues and governance. One such example is this cartoon on the draft TIA when it came out in 2020. Its purpose, even though it came from the Environment Ministry, its purpose was to dilute the process of environmental impact assessment. This particular visual became one of the online faces of the movement against the draft TIA, which eventually gathered 6 lakh signatures and pushed the government on the back foot. And that's when I really realized that this art form has both a power and a responsibility. I also highlight discoveries that go unnoticed in mainstream media. This one is special because it's from Meghalaya. It's called the thick-thumbed bat. And it was discovered from your state, your beautiful state, in 2022. And it says two thick thumbs up, one for bats and another from bamboos where it lives. And a lot of my cartoons are also based on personal observations and experiences. Here's an owl looking at a tiger pissing on the tree it lives on and says, "The only reason why I don't complain is that it smells of buttered popcorn." I was in the Western Ghats walking through Nagarhole Tiger Reserve, and among all the smells that the forest offers, I suddenly smelled buttered popcorn out of nowhere. And I asked the forest guards, "What's happening? Where's this coming from?" And they pointed at a trail of urine left behind by a tigress. So it changed my opinion of popcorn forever, and I hope all of you go through this experience as well. Some of my publishers that run my work, Go Komiks is the online wing of the Universal Press Syndicate. Round Glass is an online wildlife magazine. The Hindu reaches various households, especially in South India, every Sunday with my work. DW is a German news channel that has a column, a fortnightly column for my work online. And I also publish in Hindi with Chakmak that comes out of Bhopal. Just a quick run through of all my books. Green Humor for a Graying Planet, my first compilation of all the comics that you've seen. Bird Business is a book about bird behavior. Making Friends with Snakes is a book for children to equip them with the knowledge to identify venomous snakes and avoid snake bite. Natural Study I've already spoken about at a panel, so I won't elaborate much upon it. All these books are available at the bookstores. The Penguin titles, that is. And Pug Marks and Carbon Footprints is my latest compilation of my gag cartoons and comic strips. Other than comics and cartoons, I also do illustrations, some of which look like these. This is the wildlife map of India. And I've also been lucky to draw one for Assam, all of its wildlife, and I hope a project for Meghalaya, a similar project for Meghalaya comes around soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rohan, for that concise and very informative presentation. I hope that our audience will have questions ready for him once the session ends. So we move on to our next group of artists. This is Clement Xavier and Lisa Lugrin from France. So I'll introduce Clement Xavier. Was born in Maputo in 1981. After studying at the Angoulême School of Comics, he founded a small publishing house called Na, bringing out comics and photo novels. His graphic novels, Yekini, Lewa de Arène, published by Philip, I think, won the 2015 Angoulême Festival Revelation Prize. Geronimo, this is Memoire du Résistant Apache, and Judith Suffragettes, I hope I pronounced that right, won the 2021 Chateau du Chakravarty Prize for Historical Comics, published by Delcourt. Lisa Lugrin, after studying anthropology and cinema, Lisa went on to study comics. After graduating from the Angoulême School of Comics, she founded Na Editions with her fellow traveler, Clement Xavier. She won the Revelation Prize at the Angoulême Festival in 2015 for Yekini, published by Philip, and the Prize of Historical Comics at the Chateau du Chakravarty in 2021 for Judith Suffragettes. So I leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It works. Thank you very much. We are very glad to be here, and thanks for the invitation. And sorry, our English is not as good as the Indian people. We are from France. Yes, we can speak about our comics. So we made a lot of non-fiction comics. One about a Senegalese wrestler, one about Geronimo, as you told, one about the Jiu-Jitsu suffragettes. It's suffragists that fought for the right of vote for women. And there were a lot of violence in the demonstrations. So they had the idea to learn how to defend themselves. So it was the beginning of the woman self-defense that we still have today. And it was 100 years ago. And yes, we often speak about real stories, but we try to tell them as fiction. We try to speak about real stories, but that the readers can read it as it was a fiction, and we want it to be amazing and yes, to be pleasant to read too.
No, your English is perfect. In fact, we are here in India with Villa Swagatam. Is a great project between France and India. A lot of residences in all the India, and I'm very, very lucky because I am in Varanasi, in a fantastic institute, Bonheur, and I can work for 1 month about our next project. I'm sorry if you don't understand, please. No, okay, okay. And we try to invent a story about Ganga, a kind of biography of this holy river, because maybe you want to.
Yes, because so the next book will take place in India, and it will be about the Ganges, because you did some very interesting things. That you some people told that the Ganges River is a moral person. You know about it. And it's very interesting for us because we are all over the world. We are trying to find a way to defend the nature, and it seems a very good idea and a very clever way and pacifical way to defend nature. And in France too, we are trying to make the same things for very small rivers compared to Ganges. But yes, it's very inspiring us, what you did here. So that is our next book.
So I'd just like to explain a few of their works since they did not go through the slides. Just briefly. So the first one is Yekini. So this is a story about wrestling in Sudan, Somalia or Sudan?
It's Senegalese.
Senegalese. Okay. So it's about a wrestling. We have these 3 top wrestlers who are vying for King of the Ring. So you have that setting there, and then at the same time you have this, the 2 things taking place. You have this traditional wrestling, and then you have this presence of money, modernity, and so on. So that is Yekini. Then the second is Geronimo. So Geronimo looks at the status of Native Americans in India. So, in America, not in India. So you have Geronimo, who's an Apache leader. So he leads his people, and so the story is about him. Then you have Jiu-Jitsu suffragettes. So this word, it's a play on 2 words. It's suffragettes, which talks about women's rights, the rights of women, and how they fought to get the right of for voting in England. And then it combines that with this word Jiu-Jitsu, which is a martial arts. So you have a combination of 2 things: the politics of voting, and you have also the women's independence, their power, and their strength. So they combine these 2 together. So that's just to give you a brief idea of what their work is based on. So yeah.
And maybe just something, yes, we speak about politics, but we don't have the answers. We don't know what we have to do. We just trying to check what other people did, and that maybe there is good ideas and what they did, and so just trying to give some information to the readers. And you also saw my next comic book will be about the Zapatistas in Mexico. There are some people living in Mexico here. And yes, it's very interesting to speak about what happens in other countries than in France and in other times, like the Jiu-Jitsu suffragettes 100 years ago, because in our country it's very hard to think about political things, because there is all political people and a lot of lobbies and many people that have many interests, and it's very hard to. For instance, we had a lot of social movement in France, and it's very hard to speak about it, because if you say that, people say no, it's very hard. But if you take just a little step away, yes, you can say a lot of things. For instance, what the ladies said 100 years ago, it's still very actual here now. It's still very interesting now, but we can't say what they said. We can't say it in France. If you say the same, everybody will say no, but it will be too hard. And so it's very interesting.
Would you like to add anything else?
No,
it's fine.
Thank you.
It's fine. Okay, thank you, Clement and Lisa. So we now move on to our last presentation. This is by our own Bak Komiks from Meghalaya, Bak Kenneth. So Bak Kenneth is a comic book artist. He's an educator, a musician, and radio announcer. And Bak Komiks stands out for comics and memes that capture the frustration of the people, including the contradictions of life in Shillong City. So I'll now give the floor to Bak Kenneth for Bak.
Well, a very good morning to one and all. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the Shillong Literary Festival for this opportunity. And unfortunately, my family couldn't be here. So, secondly, I'm a bit, I apologize for my tardiness. I should have been here earlier. And yeah, I want to thank God and my family who've always been supporting me right from when I was young, when I started scribbling on walls and notebooks and wherever I could find. And obviously my comics, my content will only be circling around humor that is localized and things that happen in and around Shillong. And even in this place, I've had a lot of memories. The fondest memory I could think of when I think of this place was entering this place illegally from one opening over there, where my friends and I would go under the bridge, under the boat over there, and drink some alcohol. Okay, so yesterday was, after a long time, I think in the span of 14 to 15 years since I've been here. Being a Shillongite, it's a surprise, to hear that. But yeah, so I won't be taking too much time and seeing the work of a lot of panel members here. I feel like a very, standing in the midst of giants, actually, based on their published works. Unfortunately, I don't have any published work as yet. It's still on the, it's still going on. And what I've been doing so far was collecting these jokes from in and around Shillong, from different communities, not from different communities as well, but from different localities, actually. That's what I want to say. Different localities where these jokes are usually, told in weddings and funerals, and mostly in funerals, and especially when you go to the graveyard, when you have to, to dig the holes for the ones who have gone or passed away. That's where most of the good jokes come from. And for me, being, I wanted to collect these jokes, and my first intention was to translate these jokes into English, but that is unfortunately impossible. So these are some of the things that I'm doing. I hope that you can just read what's on the screen right now. It's just the things that we usually see in Shillong, and of course, the VIP cars, which always goes by, interrupting all the traffic, and even ambulances have to stop for them. So, next slide. And this is regarding a few years, I think it was last year. This is vultures who, I don't know where they came from, but they just sort of landed in Meghalaya. This was at the time where there were a lot of dead bodies recovered in and around the area in Meghalaya. So just the timing of the vultures landing in Meghalaya was very, very, funny in a sense, because when you look at it, it's the seriousness of it. It's very, it's very a serious issue. But I don't know. There's some sort of funny, element to it. So all right, gang, we'll hang here for tonight, and then we go scavenging for dead bodies. I hear this place is quite a hotbed for dead bodies. So moving on. And this has always been an issue with Shillong, with tribals and non-tribals. And this is regarding who is more hygienic, the Khasis, the locals, or what we call the Dakhars, okay? So I'm sorry for using that word, but that's what we call people who are not from Meghalaya. And this is usually like a mirror, being held up against our people only who've always thought that we're more hygienic, we're more, we're more sanitary compared to the next alumuri maker. I will not, this is regarding one of the most pristine rivers that was once a pristine river that even, poems have been written about it. But if you go through this river right now, if you pass by, you could actually get the smell and the pollution that you can see. So this is some sort of a satirical joke. It's all because of those non-tribals as concerned resident whose toilet flows directly into the Umkhra River. So you've seen a lot of these houses that's all around near Jayao and Maulai, where all these houses are all placed near these rivers. And when you talk about how unclean the rivers of Shillong are, the first response will always be it's because of the non-tribals. So just want to at least put some perspective into the people, into our own people, that we are also at fault with this when it comes to saving Meghalaya and also conserving the environment. Okay, my mouth is a little bit dry. I think I'm nervous. Just have a sip of water. I made a mistake of adding too many slides. I should have just 2 or 3 slides would have been enough. But okay, let's go on to the next slide. And this is regarding the number of vloggers that have suddenly popped up all around Meghalaya. And usually there are honest vloggers, then some of them are just, cloud chasers. So what I call it. So this is the abode of cloud chasers, the abode of clouds. All right, the play of words there. So next slide. Okay, this is one of the most controversial topic, and I got a lot of flack for this from comments, from Instagram, and from Facebook page. And this is regarding, when the Manipur, the tribal conflicts happened, and at that time the media was not covering it that much, and I just got this idea while browsing through the net, and I kept getting these requests to accept all cookies. So just imagine that there's a Meitei man who's sitting somewhere with a computer, and he was browsing the news, and he saw that accept all cookies. So he would so my intention was to put some focus on what's happening in Manipur, but not a lot of people were talking about it. So that's that. So can you go on to the next slide? I think it's the last slide, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. All right. Excuse me. This is another jab at YouTubers. So there's this sort of, not a trend, but I sort of made it a trend. I just saw a pattern. Not that it's a trend. I just saw a pattern. The pattern was that YouTubers who are vloggers who usually have interracial marriages, they do a lot well when it comes to for viewership. When they vlog, they talk about, this is my first time eating turumbai. Then suddenly 1 lakh views for that. Should say this is my first time trying putharos, and people are intrigued by that. I don't know, Shillong people, they want to see that. You want to see a foreigner have some the taste of Shillong, and they like outside opinions. Okay, when it comes to Shillong, people, especially the Khasi community, if you say, hey, you look exactly like a Khasi, they will not accept it. They won't say, I look like Khasi. But in fact, if you tell them, when I was looking at you, I thought you were an outsider, they feel good. They feel like, you look like a Korean, you look American, you look, anything besides Khasi, it's always, when you say you look truly Khasi, they don't accept that. So, next slide. Okay, I just want you to read this. Take a look at it. So I have to wrap it up in a short while. So this is, I think you can, it's self-explanatory, I don't have to. Okay, next slide. And this is also about our civic sense here in Shillong. It's based on that song, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, but I'm only Indian. And he spat. Next slide. Okay, so this is as a context here in Shillong. Whenever there's some sort of, this is muscle memory, okay? So whenever there's some sort of chaos going on, the first shops to be attacked will always be the non-tribal shops. So whenever they hear some commotion somewhere, they're always ready to pull down the shutters. So this is you know, muscle memory. That's what you say. Okay, next. Yeah, I only have half a minute now. Is that it? I'll lose the end of the slides. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Komiks, on ending our session on such a humorous and light-hearted note. So we don't have much time, so I would like to first ask the audience if they have any questions, any comments on the presentation they've seen so far. Anyone from the audience? Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was so enjoyable. I can't wait to get your books, Rohan. Thank you for bringing sort of, you know, issues of climate change and the environmental crisis to us in this way that is sort of away from the doom and gloom narrative that we are, you know, sort of imposed with quite a lot. Komiks, I have to, you know, check out more of your work. My question though is for Parismita. Just to go back to what you were saying right at the beginning of the session, I was intrigued by the work that you brought up right at the end about the non-fiction reportage images that you made. You know, we tend to think of reportage as something very urgent, very immediate, and so we have, you know, cameras capturing the decisive moment. Everything needs to be updated sort of here and now, and the opinions must be posted here and now. And I was just wondering what the intention was to actually flip that with the kind of work that you were doing with the reportage through sketches, through, you know, this much more, it seemed to me at least, a much more slowed down version of the kind of traditional reportage that we're used to, and what that intention was and what that really did to reportage for you. Yeah?
Right. Thank you so much for the question. So it's a little bit, so you know, so for so many of us who work on books, like for me to take 5 years over a book, it's nothing. So so even within, so even if there's a deadline of like a month or 15 days, I begin to panic a little bit and feel much. So there is that even though it is even though the graphic novel pieces were not working to the day-by-day byline thing, but at the same time, see, it was a graphic narrative project, the graphic narrative essays, which I did. I mean, the pieces did appear as events were unfolding, so which was a great experience, because one, I was working more or less in tandem with journalists on the field. Because again, and this is something that, you know, for those of you who are going to work on comics or based in the Northeast, there isn't, and you know, of course, Janice, you will know that too, there isn't that much secondary material available. So often we have to go down, we have to go to the field and do those primary interviews as well as check all the secondary material. It isn't, a lot of work isn't easily Google, you can't just go on Google and get all this information and then do the piece and have it ready. Yes, so one was that I was more or less working in step with journalists who were going into because the NRC story, the stories were on the NRC, which was which is a citizenship test that took place in Assam 2018, 2020, around then. So one was that the story was unfolding as I was reporting. So there was a lot of reaching out to different communities, and so two is yes. Your question is, is spot on, because it really made me reflect on a lot of the news I too have consumed without much thought in the past, And especially so, for instance, one of the things that really moved me very much was this particular journalistic photograph that was very much a part of some amount of the NRC reporting. And of course, the NRC reporting was also a very complex issue I won't go into now. But one of this was this witnessing was often accompanied by a photograph of like the people who were, say, who had problems with their papers, or who were in this, who were in trouble. Women who didn't have their papers and were at risk of losing citizenship, or families. Often there would be this, in order to sort of authenticate the story as a part of the journalistic work, there would be these photographs where they would be standing there, against the field or against their house or against the homestead, and this photograph. And I've always wondered how much of this, and how much, the whole question of consent. And it's not a very simple question of consent, because it's not simply that, may I take your photograph? It is also a question of how that photograph is going to circulate and what the implications of this is going to be with the kind of internet situation we have now. This photograph may stay there forever. It may come back, as it is happening now. It may come back to haunt you 5 years, 10 years down the line, so on. So this was something I began to think of. And I tried to find a way out of that with, this whole other, this thing of slow journalism, where you slow down. And yes, you are right. Using the mode of sketching. I didn't use a tablet. I used a diary. It's a sketch pad. I used a sketch pad with a pencil. One, because I was going into communities which were often already quite besieged, so to go in with all this technology, sometimes it was much easier to, got me better access and more trust. So yes, this whole idea of the sketch, live sketches, using it in the stories, trying to see, maybe trying to work out a certain amount of protection for the people you're writing about, as well as trying to get the news. There was a lot of, I'm not sure how successful I was, but it was definitely got me thinking of a lot of these questions. So thank you so much for this.
I had a question for Parismita, if I'm allowed. I was reading Hotel at the End of the World. I'm here. As an illustrator, I've been looking to incorporate more indigenous elements from indigenous tribal art and even folklore and mythology into my illustrations. And I was blown away when I flipped to the chapter of Pema and I saw everything illustrated in a Thangkhiew-esque art form. As a graphic novelist, as an illustrator, and as a writer, what do you make of incorporating these elements in your work? Is it your way of paying homage, or is it something larger?
So I'm usually a little nervous about questions about my first book, because it was in some ways a lot of, I think I largely went by instinct, and sometimes that's a good thing. It helps you take risks, but at the same time, it is also it's also dicey how it is. But I can only answer your question from where I stand today, not from where I stood in 2009 in some sense. So my process I have really reviewed a lot of the way I'm going to incorporate other cultures, other art styles, and so on. Also because I've looked a little bit, I've spent some time looking at textiles and design and so on, particularly with in the context of the Northeast, right? So it is really so many of our design culture. So I'm just going to sort of step into the question of design because I think it illustrates the question of art styles a little bit. I have looked for answers there. So I often find, so for instance, a lot of our traditional designs, and all of you here will know that, come from very specific contexts. So, designers often who come from traditional communities cannot just pick up a design and incorporate it into a textile that they want to design or modernize and so on. There is the community. There are all these. There are a lot of norms and cultures that. So I have learned. So I still don't have an answer on how to engage, how to respectfully pay tribute and use other art. Use other art traditions while being mindful with questions of privilege, which again comes into the forefront, especially because I write in English, unfortunately, and because, and also, because I think sometimes maybe I can just get away with taking something and no one will question me about it, So things like that, I have to be very, I'm trying to build that into my process now. So there are no easy answers. So for instance, I'm like, say, the Warli art or something like that. I'm very, say, if you just use a piece like that without crediting which particular culture, which particular artist, that is very problematic. So even if it is going to be, yes, so I still haven't figured it out, but I'm looking at the way our designers and our communities are looking at using the traditional and modernizing with, and there are so there are also stories and styles that I may want to use, but I won't, if I feel that I can't find a safe way to negotiate this. So it's work in progress. Thank you.
I have a question for each of you, actually. Joshua, you began by saying thank you for including graphic novels and comics in a literary festival. And so I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are on why that is so, and if you felt that it's come from somewhere, obviously. Because honestly, for me, as a curator of literary events, I don't see that genre differently from the rest of other genres in books. But it'll be interesting to understand where that's coming from within our city or elsewhere. So if I may, I'm just going to address one question to each of you. Rohan, I'm really interested because a couple of years ago, I found this book, which is the Meta Mouse. And so what it is actually, so Mouse, the graphic novel, and then there is Meta Mouse, which is actually like double the size of the number of pages of Mouse. And it's a process of the writing of Mouse, and it was what was left out. And I've actually never thought of, this process of actually editing in the graphic novel. So I would love to understand that bit of the things you leave out, if I may. And Clement and Lisa, you spoke, and I thought that was really interesting, but I think I missed what you were trying to say about things that were said 100 years ago, which are still relevant today, and therefore, but you can't say it today. Could you expand a little bit on that? Comics, you spoke about, and we've had many conversations, and I'm so happy to have you here, really. When we've had conversations before this as well, and now about your plans to do a book, what would that mean to you? What are the stories? Because a book is as opposed to one strip, it's going to be many things. And how do you see that for yourself? Parismita, I know you in so many different avatars. I think it all comes together, and even if it's not coming together, it's many things. And so much respect for the work that you do as an educator, as a storyteller. In your collection of short stories, Peace Has Come, which I'm personally I love that book, and your graphic novel work. So how do you place yourself in all of these different forms and these different identities? Anyone can go first.
I'll start, so I'll keep it brief so that the others will have time. So why I said that comics and graphic novels have this platform now, basically I do not say that they are ignored, but it's more or less to bring it into the limelight, to bring it into the main picture of literary festivals. For example, our own local artists, Komiks, whom we all know online, but now it's part of the literary festival. So I think that was my main point, that it be taken as being part of the mainstream. And from this onwards, basically it's about the impact on the younger generation to more or less give some, if not inspiration, but some kind of guidance, some kind of, we can say, point of reference with regards to their work. So that is my main point only. Thank you so much.
I'll answer a bit of the question you asked, Joshua, because I'm somebody who's an outsider to literature festivals. I'm not used to the culture of literature festivals. And at the risk of being thrown out of here, I would say that authors coming and reading out passages from their books put me to sleep. And which is why I feel that graphic novels must be a part of literature festivals naturally, because images are where the spice is. And Meghalaya loves its spice, right? Coming to your question, yes, editing of comics is serious business. If my own process is looked at, I also use a sketchpad for most of my drafts, and I'm not familiar with the iPad or tablets, but my work is digital in an old school way. Only 25% of each of the notebooks I use for drafts is actually used to make a final product. 75% is something that never makes it to a publication. And that's because the striking of the right balance between humor and scientific accuracy, in my case about ecology, and even about political issues whenever I'm talking about them, if I'm presenting an opinion, so for that opinion to be sound and well researched, that is very important. So I follow a few general rules, which is that if a cartoon has made me smile, I would assume that it would make my reader smile as well. If I have learned something new out of working on a cartoon, I would assume that it would have the same impact on my reader, because I generally consider myself dumber than my audience.
Thank you for your question. Yes, for instance, we were very surprised when we learned, get documentation about the suffragists, because they said very clever things. For instance, here it is, she's called Emmeline Pankhurst, and she says, we suffragists have a great mission, the greatest the world has never known, to free half of humanity. So I thought it was interesting, this way of seeing. And she also says that because they were violent at this time, and the political men said, you are too violent, but she says, you are violent because you don't mind of killing people in the wars, but we don't kill people. But the thing that we do, and that you can't, that is too much for you, is that we strike private property, because they used to strike windows, and yes, this kind of things, it can be told today in the demonstrations, in social demonstrations in France too, for instance. And also the fact that the woman said, if you don't protect us, to the policemen and to the men, we will protect ourselves. And it seems to me very actual too.
Okay, ma'am. All right. Regarding what I said earlier regarding the book that I'm about to, it's not actually. It's like it's in a comic book format, but these jokes that I collected, there will be in another, kind of series. But the ones that I'm focusing now is based on the stories and childhood traumas when I was a child, the punishments we receive. When you look back at that, it's humorous now, but when at that particular time it was quite traumatic for me as a child. And these end of the world kind of scenarios in it. And there are these subjects that I will stress upon, mostly on my childhood obsession with funerals, and whenever I hear the bell tolls, when if it's not a weekend but it's the weekday, other people would find it a little bit shocked or sad, or expecting bad news, but to me it's music to my ears. because that'll be a day off from school. So I would run quickly to my mother and ask her who died. If it's a relative, then it's 1 week off from school. So that's that's how, like, it's really funny. Even I used to tell my students that one day when I go away, when I die, a lot of you will be sad, but most of the time you'll be a little bit excited also. When with Khasi funerals, with the Khasi funerals, there's a lot of ritual. There's a little bit of celebratory part to it, with the tea and the serving of food and all that. You tend to forget, and it's in a nice way. You forget your troubles. The people gathering all around you. You don't remember, not remember, but you tend to be a little bit comforted from that experience. So those are the things that I will stress upon on the books. And also these apocalyptic things that, when I was a child, that going to church and this trauma of, not trauma, it's like a end of the world thing, the world's going to end soon. And you see the signs of wars and all that. Even, nowadays there's these rumors of wars going on. And when I was a child, whenever I'm alone in bed, when I wake up too late, I used to get anxiety attacks, So I will search around for my mother and my brother. If they're not around, I thought that I was left behind. So I'll be the only one, and all the holy people are flying off to heaven, and I'm the only one. So those are the things that, I want to stress upon, the childhood, memories and all that. Yeah. Thank you.
Quickly, yes, I too feel more than speaking, responding to the question. I almost feel like saying I'm really looking forward to this book, from what little you've told us about it. Yes, I think no. Thank you so much for the question, Mary. So when I actually began, when I realized I was going to write this book of prose, this book of stories, at the back of my mind, I did feel, I was like, this is so bad for my career. Because, because the way publishing works, you should get a book out every few years. That wasn't happening. And then here I had written a graphic novel. I had a little bit of a readership, and then you move on to prose and so on. But I think and of course, then I've also done nonfiction and all of that. But here, I think now at this point, when I think about this question, I think so much of, and this is also, the conversations I've had with Joshua, Kenneth's work. So much of our work is also, I think, shaped by the political and economic and the social conditions of the world we live in, because we don't have a very robust comic support ecosystem so often, which is a good thing, and maybe, which is not a good thing, of course, but it can also be, maybe it also shapes our work differently, because we keep working, but our works may not take the traditional form it may have taken if we didn't have all our troubles, right? So I think it is a little bit, I think I've also done a lot of the shape shifting, because the material that I've been confronted it have demanded different forms, they have demanded different mediums of expression. So thank you.